NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he will meet Danish officials next week to discuss rising tensions over Greenland. This comes as Washington continues to show interest in acquiring this strategic Arctic territory. Venezuela's Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello has said that a U.S. military attack that captured President Nicolás Maduro killed 100 people and wounded dozens. He has called the attack on Venezuela terrible. U.S. President Donald Trump signs a memorandum ordering the United States to withdraw from 66 international organizations, saying they no longer serve American interests. The White House says the move targets dozens of UN and non-UN bodies. An immigration officer has fatally shot a woman in Minneapolis, with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem saying the officer defensively shot to protect himself. The woman has been identified as 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Jordan and the European Union will hold their first ever bilateral summit in Amman, bringing together Jordanian King Abdullah with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The landmark meeting builds on the January 2025 strategic and comprehensive partnership, which includes a €3 billion EU assistance package. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced that Australia will launch a royal commission into the December 14th Bondi Beach mass shooting that killed 15 people, amid intensified calls for tougher controls and stronger action against anti-Semitism. BRICS, now comprising of 10 countries, is holding its first ever drill. It will begin tomorrow in South African waters under the joint actions to ensure the safety of shipping and maritime economic activities, with reports saying Russia and Iran will participate, a move expected to raise concerns in Western capitals. According to Syrian media reports, Syrian Finance Minister Mohammad Yasser Barnieh held talks with a Saudi Fund for Development delegation. The visit follows a January 6th meeting with Syrian Education Minister as Riyadh expands concessional financing for infrastructure and basic services in Syria. Now we start this hour with Asia. Japan is calling for renewed dialogue with Russia to resolve long-standing issues, officials say. Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara says that Japanese-Russian relations are currently in a difficult situation, citing unresolved matters such as visits to ancestral graves and fisheries disputes. Kihara has emphasized the need to maintain a proper exchange of views with Moscow to address these concerns. Has also confirmed that Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi recently met with lawmaker Muneo Suzuki, who visited Moscow last year. Officials did not provide details on the discussions, but Suzuki said the Prime Minister stressed the importance of keeping relations with Russia steady. Since 2022, Japan has imposed multiple rounds of sanctions on Russia, causing a sharp decline in trade and economic cooperation. In response, Moscow suspended peace treaty consultations and withdrew from talks on joint projects in the southern Kuril Islands, halting visits by former Japanese residents. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Collins Jong-Yu Keith. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, looking at Japanese and Russian relationship, how do you analyze the situation, and what are the sticking points looking at their historical land disputes, also the fisheries?
Yeah, there have been ups and downs in bilateral relations between both nations. We have seen how this is a critical point for both countries, especially for Japan, facing this three-pronged threat from Beijing, from Moscow, and from Pyongyang. And the fundamental obstacle remains of the dispute over the Kuril Islands, Northern Territories, which has been unresolved for decades now, since the Second World War. So this dialogue is less about any kind of positive projections on imminent breakthroughs, but it's more on preventing further escalations or risks or deteriorations, and to keep channels open for further dialogues, and also hopefully for future compromise. But both sides know that it is increasingly unlikely for any deal to be made soon, but there's this compelling need for dialogue, especially also for Japan. Now, Japan really wants, to break this diplomatic isolation in Asia, in terms of giving this newfound engagement and platform for Russia, especially as Moscow is increasing its dependence on Beijing. So, of course, Russia also wanted a new breakthrough in terms of getting, further opening for Russia in this part of the world, and to keep a fallback option for Moscow also, rather than to keep Asia as a full consolidated anti-Russia front. So this is important for both sides, and of course also Moscow sees the values of Tokyo in terms of being an increasingly important technological and economic counterweight against this over-reliance on China, despite the no limits ties with China. So there's still this underlying wariness in one another. So of course China has been the silent factor, and of course also Japan is aware that Russia has been fully absorbed into the orbit of China's strategic calculations, and this will reduce the strategic maneuvering options for Tokyo. And dealing now with Moscow to open up new opportunities for dialogue is also about to prevent a greater China-Russia alignment, to give a newfound leverage to Russia, and of course also to give Japan a more steady breathing room in terms of its dispute with Russia in the northern territory. So this is a multi-pronged alignment strategy. It's not being seen as soft or weak on the part of Japan. Of course, Japan now is trapped into this further difficult ties with Beijing, and now we have also seen the recent visit by South Korea to China now in the bid to appease Beijing. So Japan is increasingly feeling that it's being left alone now. So there's this need for Japan to increase its own leverage and fallback options also, without being seen as a sign of weakness, but as a strategic hedging and balancing, and to further manage relations in a more controlled environment.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. Talking about hidden agenda, about China and the U.S., how do you think they will be eyeing this Japan and Russia's latest talks, or Japan's comments towards Russia? And do you think that how will Japan be able to balance its close relationship with US, while also trying to resolve and restart dialogue with Russia?
Well, it's not a zero-sum game. It shouldn't be at the expense of the other. Of course, it will be welcome if there's this opening for serious discussions and dialogues to prevent escalations on the northern territories, which will in fact have these profound implications on Japan's readiness to fight a two-front war should there be a conflict, or should there be an invasion by China on Taiwan. And of course also Washington is expecting Japan also to play its part should that happen, in terms of supporting the US forces in halting the advances of China on Taiwan. And the last thing that both sides want will be for China to push Russia to open up yet another front, another conflict on the northern side of Japan, which will again have these serious implications also on the capacity of both sides, of both Tokyo and Washington, to fight China over Taiwan. So of course this is something that neither side would want, and Russia is also calculative and strategic in not being wanting to be seen as yet another ally of China in this aspect, to be beholden under China's strategic maneuvering to align with China's push to have a multiple fronts in terms of choking both Japan and the US. And of course this is being seen in a more strategic manner, and Japan is also of course relying heavily and on the need to be fully aligned with Washington's policy in this region. And of course also I don't see any possibility of Takaichi wanting to be seen as weak or soft to Russia, while at the same time being seen as tough on China. The strategic calculations on Tokyo will be of course also to pry Russia away from this grip and the grasp of Beijing, and that to give this new opening for Russia in this part of the world, that there's no compelling or ultimate or sole need for Russia to be fully aligned with China alone in Asia or in the Indo-Pacific, and the way forward is to resort to diplomatic pathways to hold dialogues to prevent escalations, and not wanting that region, the northern territories, to be yet as another weak point for Japan to fight a two-prong or two-front war. And Russia is well aware of that, and Russia is also trying to send a subtle message to Beijing that it still has the options also to open up new frontiers with Japan, and not using Japan as a pretext, to be fully aligned with Beijing's push or pressure on Beijing's own discord with Tokyo as a whole.
Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Collins. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to Middle East, the Saudi ambassador to Yemen has confirmed meeting with a delegation from the Southern Transitional Council. The discussion focused on plans for the upcoming Southern Cause Conference set to take place soon in Riyadh. This conference, hosted by the Saudi Arabia, will bring together various southern Yemeni factions to find fair solutions to the region's issues. The initiative follows a former request from Rashad al-Alimi, head of Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council, to Saudi Arabia to host these talks. The aim is to ensure an inclusive dialogue and prevent any group from monopolizing the situation. Southern Cause. The conference is expected to address the political, social, and historical concerns of the southern governorates, with hopes of fostering stability, peace, and development. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Collins Chong-Yu-Keith. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security, and Strategy Analyst. Joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for staying with us.
Thank you.
Now, how will this, be shaping Saudi Arabia's hold in certain parts of Yemen, and also how do you think where do you think UAE stands in terms of all these developments happening?
Well, this is significant. We have seen how this reflects, the recognition by Saudi Arabia that this conflict in Yemen is no longer binary in nature. It's no longer, between the government and Houthis, but it's a multi-layered platform. And of course, this being seen now is about southern self-determination. And for many in the south, this war is not only about the Houthis, but it's about decades of, political marginalization, neglect in terms of economic, advancement and suppression of identity and all that. But it is again a reflection of how Riyadh is hedging against a fragmented end state in Yemen. And of course, Riyadh wants a stable southern buffer, and to prevent southern Yemen from falling fully under the influence or control or external dominance by UAE without any presence by Saudi. And of course, also most importantly, to avoid this post-war vacuum where this will give rise to the risks and possibilities of exploitation by rival powers or even by extremists. So it's about controlling this trajectory of fragmentation. But of course, also this has weakened the narrative that there will be a fully unified Yemeni state. And we have seen how the SCC has long been supported and backed by UAE, and this involvement by Riyadh also suggests that there's this, of course, increased competition and rivalry. But of course, also this move also helps to ensure that southern Yemen is not exclusively being aligned only with Abu Dhabi or UAE's interests alone. So it's also a multi-pronged, subtle signal and message to other rivals, including Iran, that Saudi is trying to elevate or consolidate or synergize its influence whenever it can, wherever it can, even though the Houthis still dominate the northern side. So it's a strategic political maneuvering, power maneuvering, and with multi-layered implications also to the region.
And how do you think? Today we saw that there was a detention of Southern Transitional Council officials by Saudi Arabia. So how do you think, how might the alleged detention of this council officials affect the trust and coordination between Saudi Arabia and UAE-backed separatist forces?
Yeah, of course, we've seen how this has been, being viewed differently, and as to what the intent of Riyadh is. And of course, also we've seen how the erosion of the influence and control of UAE over this part. And now with this increased presence and control and dominance and influence by Riyadh, will of course give these changes in terms of the strategic maneuvering by UAE, But of course, also the implications will not only be confined to Yemen alone. Involves the wider regional power plays, in terms of rivalry, not only in terms of soft power, but also in terms of the economic gains and the legitimacy of the influence that one can have in terms of controlling, in terms of providing buffer, safe buffer zones, preventing escalations that might harm the interests of both nations in the long run, but also how effectively that will have this capacity to create a stabilized environment and to ensure that the transition towards this post-war environment will be of a controlled nature, and how much of an involvement that both sides can give in terms of preventing yet another situation where it can turn out again to be a failed state, and the implications will be profound for both nations, and it will have these similar implications for both sides, whatever the outcome will be. So it's of great importance for both sides also to give this level of trust and confidence, on this situation on the ground, so that it will then be turned into, as a pretext, as a feel-good factor, that either one side can provide this stabilizing factor that will ensure the interests of all sides, but ultimately will ensure the national interests of both either Saudi or the UAE in the long run.
Thank you for laying it out all there for us, Mr. Collins. With that, I would like to thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump has slammed his NATO allies as the rift over his Greenland comments continues. Taking to his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump has claimed that NATO would be nowhere without the USA, and that without his personal intervention, Russia would have captured all of Ukraine by now. The American president has also slammed Norway for his Nobel Peace Prize snub, a prize that Trump campaigned extensively for over the last year. He ended his tirade on Truth Social with yet another bold statement, saying that the only nation that China and Russia fear and respect is the Trump rebuilt USA. This comes just as Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that an American delegation is set to meet with Danish representatives next week to discuss the Greenland issue. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Rabinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Mr. Sachdev, for joining us once again. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, how do you think U.S. or President Trump is using his power or his say towards NATO? Isn't he, by saying such things, and isn't he pressing them away from U.S.?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, he is not pressing them away. He's trying to change their behavior. I mean, if we were to step back and see why is Trump so unhappy, condescending, at times angry with Europe? Why does J.D. Vance talk what he talked in Berlin? Why does the national security doctrine of US and others, they're saying that, Europe faces a civilizational erasure. Bottom line is that Trump and conservatives believe that Europe has become too liberal. Europe exported liberal ideas to the US, and now they say that, or they think that they do not want any liberal ideas from Europe coming to American soil. Basically that. Therefore, they are pressing down, they're tightening the screws on Europe to change its behavior. Everything else now then falls within that context. And yes, it's a reality. NATO without America is merely a European force. In the European armies, for too long, they have underinvested both in men and material. So they're not a threatening force, all the European countries even combined, if with respect to Russia. And yes, Trump is right also that the only country which perhaps China and Russia, respect is United States. Okay, he says the US under Trump, but even under or not under Trump, any other president, America is a force to be reckoned with.
Right. And building on why you said you highlighted why is he so unhappy with Europe? Is this only about ideology or sociology, or is there something else from Trump's side? And he seems frustrated with the fact that U.S. is losing its being the hegemony in the world, as now the world moves forward with or moves this transition that's changing this towards the world order, towards a more multipolar world.
I'm defining the world of today in which we are living is a new world matrix which is under construction. So all these moves by America, Europe, Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, all these moves which are happening right now, this is a new matrix under construction in which we are living. That is one. Secondly, with respect to Europe and America, yes, ideology is one big, large factor. That Europe is liberal, whereas America under Trump, or Trump wants America to be absolutely on the right, a white Christian nation. Fine, that's their right. They can choose whichever kind of nation they want. But in addition to ideology, there is also corporate interest. American corporates believe, and it's a fact also to a large extent, that Europe has too many regulations, they take too much time, and even in environment, for example, the standards which Europe sets are too complicated. So corporate America wants as much of regulations in Europe pushed back, including for data privacy, including for environmental regulations, so that they can do business the way they want with the least amount of constraints. So there's a high level of, very, very high level of corporate synergy with what the political and ideological views of American regime right now are with respect to Europe.
I would like to build on that word you mentioned, Mr. Sachdev. I really like that, a new world matrix. Now, now that you've mentioned that is under construction, can it or this transition happen without a big disruptions, or can this transition happen peacefully, rather smoothly? What do you think?
Thank you very much. In fact, my next book is titled
Oh,
New MUCO, a new world matrix under construction in which we live.
that's
So
perfect.
again, going to be a thick book. I'm working on it because you see, there's too much
Yes.
of too many different words being used. What is the new
Yes.
world order? It's a multipolar world, multilateral, multiplexity, world disorder. So I've tried to frame it in a sense that I think this lexicon, new world matrix, under construction, captures all of that. That said, the transition, or let's say the matrix which has been constructed, will there be degradation and conflicts? Yes, I do think there will be. Essentially, what is also happening is that we are seeing not a revival. Let's say, I mean, it's back to the jungle.
Yes.
Is back to the jungle. Is might is right, and back to the jungle, and survival of the fittest is heading in that sense. For nations, for individuals, for power, is all heading that way in this new world matrix, which is being constructed right now.
That's so interesting and also perfectly said. And yes, I completely agree with you. Indeed, a lot of political words are outdated right now. And what do you think, as this new world order is being constructed, a new world matrix is being constructed, where does BRICS stand? Where does India stand?
BRICS and India in this do stand somewhere in this matrix. Okay, everyone stands somewhere in this matrix. The point is, America wants to be the sun of this matrix. If it's a planetary solar system, America wants to be the sun. So America wants to be the pivotal player. Now, there will be clusters forming, and there are clusters forming. The very idea of a matrix is that everyone is interconnected in some way or the other. And some connections are stronger, some are weaker, some are pulling together, some equations are pulling away vectors. So all of that is happening. Now, as far as BRICS is concerned, I think BRICS has a challenge. BRICS doesn't have a clear composition firstly. The membership of BRICS is very diverse. All these countries cannot have a similar view for, going ahead, I would think. Other than, yeah, sure, some areas, but in terms of geopolitical areas, BRICS cannot have a consolidated voice, I would think. One. Secondly, BRICS has been, flirting with the idea of de-dollarization. There is talk going around on that. That is something which could happen, not de-dollarization at least, but, trading in local currencies. But in today's environment, America has clearly threatened, BRICS specifically, we are talking BRICS, that if it were to discuss even de-dollarization, there'll be tariffs imposed on BRICS countries. And due to this threat of Trump, this year's BRICS meeting, if you will see carefully, did not go deep or did not much discuss quote unquote de-dollarization. So BRICS is a very BRICS is not a wholesome or entity, organization, platform, I would say. But yes, it represents a part of the world and several nations of the world, and they would have many things in common, but they cannot and will not be able to, I think, sustain as a geopolitical force. Okay, they will be there, but not much.
And lastly, Mr. Sachdev, if US, like you rightfully mentioned, is trying to be the sun in this matrix, right? So who will be able to put it back to its place if not BRICS, or if it is maybe BRICS? US might not be the sun in this case. US might be put back to its place as a Jupiter or another planet.
Great, Asuka, you're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, sure. Who would put it back in its place? One would be China. And bottom line, that is the game also happening. America is the #1 empire. America does not want to give up, has decided it will use all its force, might, military, money, muscle, whatever, to not give up the #1 spot. China is the #2, racing to become #1, and China says, stop me if you can. The reality would be that America cannot. Trump is betting that through his aggressive actions right now, that he will ensure that America will remain ever on top of the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years, because China will not be able to obtain the technologies and America will push so far ahead, etc. But that may not happen. So the force that can counter America will be China, and China in concert, in tandem with some of its partners. India may partner with China in some areas. Okay, Russia will partner with China probably in several areas more than India does. But that will be probably the vectors or the forces in the matrix that would counterbalance America.
Right. We will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ravinder Sachdev for joining us today and sharing that insight as an international affairs expert. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to South America. Venezuela's interior minister has said that deposed leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife were injured during the U.S. military operation that was carried out in the early hours of January 3rd last week. According to the interior minister, Maduro sustained an injury to his leg, while his wife, who was detained alongside him, suffered a head injury. Let's listen in.
Vivos. En ese momento, Cilia fue herida en la cabeza y un golpe en el cuerpo. El hermano Nicolás una herida en una pierna. Afortunadamente están mejorando de esa dolencia, pero ahí están las consecuencias de un ataque artero.
The Venezuelan minister has also added that the raid resulted in heavy casualties, with around 100 people reportedly killed during the operation. This marks the first official death toll released by Venezuelan authorities since the U.S. incursion on January 3rd. Officials have also reported that a significant portion of Maduro's security unit was killed during the assault, but the Venezuelan military has so far publicly identified only a limited number of its personnel among the dead. Additionally, Cuban authorities have also confirmed casualties among their military and intelligence staff deployed in Venezuela. China's government has strongly condemned recent U.S. actions in Venezuela as serious violations of international law. Beijing's commerce and foreign ministries have called the seizure of Venezuelan oil tankers and related moves illicit and unilateral, saying such measures breach global legal norms and undermine sovereign rights. China opposes sanctions without legal basis and urges respect for international law in resolving the disputes. Now we move the focus on to Iran. Tensions in Iran continue to rise as protests against soaring living costs entered their 12th consecutive day. The unrest has turned deadly with the stabbing of a police officer in Malard, west of Tehran. Shahin Dehgan, a member of the Iranian police force, was killed while attempting to control the ongoing violence. The protest sparked by rising prices and the collapse of the rial began on December 28 and have now spread to 25 of Iran's 31 provinces. Local media reports confirm that efforts to identify the attackers are underway and dozens have been killed, including members of the security forces, as demonstrators continue to call for change amidst a worsening economic crisis. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.